Okay, welcome to another of EnOcean's IoT webinars. Thank you all for attending. There's still a few attendees coming on, so I'll probably ramble for a little bit. Anyway, today's session is in conjunction with IAconnects. They're one of our EnOcean Alliance partners, and we'll discuss the benefits of wireless connectivity in a converged IoT systems. Next slide, please. I'm John Corbett. I'm Sales Director for Northern Europe and the Middle East, and I work for EnOcean, which is a Munich-based company, as many of you probably already know. I'll just let Pete introduce himself before I carry on.
Thanks, John. So yeah, hi, I'm Pete Smith, Head of Business Development at IAconnects. We're a IoT solutions provider based in the UK and have been part of the EnOcean Alliance for a number of years now.
Okay, next, please. Okay, so what have we got here? So the EnOcean and IAconnects have been a partnership for quite some time. We've got a history back in sort of the BMS era, but now we have really a partnership that addresses the major issues of IoT sensing and infrastructure for today. If you look at it, wired solutions are time consuming, they're inflexible, very costly to install, and also very messy. So a lot of people have moved towards conventional wireless solutions. But these have batteries and they're very costly and very inconvenient to replace, but especially if you got them up in a ceiling, you get health and safety problems, things like that. So batteries are really not the sort of the panacea of a wireless solution. Thankfully, EnOcean can actually offer customers a good fit and forget wireless solution that fits really well into IoT systems today. They require no batteries, so they're fit and forget. They are basically proven in over 100 million buildings because we've got, sorry, 100 million? A million buildings, because we've got a good heritage from our BMS days. On top of that, we've also got partnerships with people like Aruba, whereby we can actually sort of piggyback on the infrastructure in a secure way. And I know that Pete will go into some of that more detail on that later on today. Next slide, please. So who's EnOcean? So we're basically an energy harvesting company. We have the IP around a number of different ways of generating power from the environment. The primary one that you see at the top there is kinetic energy. This uses an electrodynamic generator. It's basically an inductive harvester. So that when you push a switch, for instance, it induces a charge and it will turn a radio on and it will send a signal off to a light. And we use that in the devices you see here, which are basically wall switches. But it can be used in other things. For instance, if you ride on a London bus today, you'll see a number of push buttons. Those are EnOcean's. We also use photovoltaic energy, so indoor light particularly. A lot of these cells are actually tuned to indoor light. So anything that where you have a lit environment, you can power. Should you make it a little bit dark, we have energy storage devices. These last for about four plus days, depending on how you configure the device. So we can have things like PIRs, vibration sensors, multi-sensors, wall sensors, devices like that, temperature sensing, all of which can be powered by light. Finally, we have thermal energy. This is basically generated by the Seebeck effect, for those that know about these things. It's generated through a temperature difference. And so what you can do, for instance, is have a hot radiator, which will power the motor inside a thermostatic radiator valve, which is shown here. So 3 different types of energy generation that we typically use. Pete will go on to show you how these can be used within the IoT environment. Pete, over to you.
Thanks for that, John. So today I'm going to be talking to you from the IAconnects perspective. Just a little bit of background on the company. We're a UK-based IoT solutions provider with IoT projects across the UK and Europe and North America as well. We've had 15 years experience in what is now known as kind of the IoT industry. You can often stick smart in front of another word and it means the same thing nowadays. But anything that is now classed as IoT is something where we've had solutions over the past decade or so. We're also an Ocean Alliance member. We've been working with EnOcean and some of the other member companies for the past few years now, and we were actually the first UK solutions provider to use EnOcean devices just over 10 years ago now. So today I'm wanting to speak to you about how you can use your network infrastructure to facilitate asset performance data collection and BMS control, and show that this is now a reality and something that can really be done, and it's not just something that's spoken about or the art of the possible. So you can run through the latest technologies alongside our MobiusFlow software platform, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about shortly. By using your current network infrastructure, it can dramatically reduce the infrastructure costs for IoT projects, and also provide a single control platform for smarter buildings, asset lifecycle management, and other things like that. So I'm going to demonstrate the benefits of truly converged systems and what we see as the future for wireless connectivity. I'll also touch on an overview of the EnOcean and Aruba solutions that IAconnects provide as a company. Before I go into too much more detail about all of that, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the key components for an IoT type solution. So you can see a number of images on the screen here, and all of them are either a gateway, connectors, the MobiusFlow software logo that we've got there at the top center, and then a range of sensors and devices as well. So the gateway is the one at the top left with the little orange IAconnects plate. So this is a physical Intel-based gateway that is kind of our traditional route of using a gateway in a solution. However, you can now use a virtual instance of the gateway, so run the MobiusFlow software in the cloud. And as I said earlier, I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in the future slides. One of IAconnects' kind of key areas and something that sets us apart from others is the connectors that we've developed. So the connectors are almost a simple type of gateway because they receive and also send out messages from sensors or devices. And in the past, these type of devices would only work for one protocol. So it might just work for EnOcean, or it might work for EnOcean and workplace occupancy, or EnOcean and IQRF. But you would have to have separate pieces of hardware for each protocol in the past. So nowadays we've updated our hardware and the software alongside it so that you can have multiple protocols within each piece of hardware. This obviously reduces the infrastructure needed for a solution, and can also mean you're not having as many devices connected either to the network or the gateway's own network that it creates if you're using a physical one. So there are a number of options for connection type, which you can see here on the right hand side. So combinations of Wi-Fi, PoE, narrowband IoT, LTE, or a combination of all of the above. And then there are also a number of different protocols that can be added into the different module slots there. So EnOcean is obviously the key one, which we're looking at today. There's also IQRF, LoRaWAN, and workplace occupancy. And then finally, just a few examples of sensors and devices. These here all happen to be EnOcean ones. So there's air quality type devices, there's multi-sensors, water leak sensors, presence detection or occupancy sensors, and then two different types of switches, and also a magnetic contact, which can be used for kind of window and door opening. So now on to the MobiusFlow software. So this is IAconnects' own piece of software that we've developed over a number of years. It's something that we've been using as an organisation for well over 10 years now, and 5 or 6 years ago we decided that it was something that was actually a commercially viable product, so we just needed to add some extra features in there, which I'll go through in a couple of moments. So just as an overview, MobiusFlow allows multiple non-manufacturer specific open protocols all to feed into one solution, also with the option to send data to one or many third-party applications or BMS. So just to run through the diagram which you see here, all of the logos or icons along the bottom represent different sensors and devices. From there, those signals send to a connector, whether that's a single or multiple protocol connector. In this particular diagram, it's showing EnOcean and IQRF. So you can go to the connector here on the left or the one on the right. and then you can either feed through into a physical gateway, so this intelligent gateway here, or the virtual intelligent gateway here, and then into a third-party application or cloud service. So there's just some of the kind of the major players listed there which we work with, but there's many more that we work with, such as excuse me, such as desk booking systems like iOffice and so forth, and I'll go over some of those in our reference cases later on. Just to go over the benefits of the MobiusFlow software, it can help reduce commissioning costs. It's a scalable piece of software. There's local connectivity available, as well as Wi-Fi or cellular or cloud. It runs using microservices, and this is usually done on the local Node-RED instance, which can also provide a dashboard to visualize data. So I will go through the Node-RED piece in a couple of slides' time. First of all, I just wanted to show a quick screenshot of the MobiusFlow software itself. So here you can see along the top, there are 4 tabs: configuration, diagnostics, flows, and administration. The admin tab is exactly what you'd expect. It's just adding or removing different users and changing the different levels of access they have. So focusing on the config tab here, you can see there's a number of different services, and you can just see the start of the objects being listed down here. So in order to run a solution, this one just happens to be in our office down in Henley-on-Thames in the UK. You can see that you need to drag in a route service, a gateway service, the Node-RED connector, and then a list of EnOcean devices. And for this example, I've selected one of them, which is an EnOcean temperature sensor, and I've removed the actual unique ID and just replaced it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But every single EnOcean device will have a unique ID, which you need to manually input. But prior to that, if you've selected a temperature sensor, it will know what the EnOcean equipment profile is that you need to use in order to send the relevant data further on. Secondly, this is the Diagnostics tab. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's a services and an objects option. You can see here, I'm on the services tab, and here you can view all the different services that are running currently in the software. Most of those services you can actually turn on or off. We've removed the option for the connectors and for the Mobius REST API, just to avoid people accidentally turning the software off and needing a manual reset. But you can see that there's a couple of different types of devices on here. So EnOcean and workplace occupancy. If you just wanted the EnOcean sensor data coming through, you could just turn off the workplace occupancy one, and then you would just get the EnOcean data arriving into Node-RED and into any visualization. Here we're showing Node-RED. So some of you may be familiar with this, as it's open source software, and we have embedded this into our software, into MobiusFlow. You can see that there's multiple different cloud options on the left-hand side, some of which I referred to earlier on, and there's also a number of different EnOcean MobiusFlow nodes as well here, which you can drag in. What I wanted to represent in this screenshot was the third-party cloud integration option. So just as an example, I've used the Azure IoT Hub, and from here you can get all of the data coming through from all of the sensors into this particular instance of the software, and then that can be represented in Azure IoT Hub. There's also the option to integrate with things such as DALI lighting or Modbus, and if anyone has any questions about those later on, I can go into more detail offline. So I'd like to start with an interactive poll now. So this is based on the question you can see on the screen. So what's the main blockers you see for installing IoT solutions? So 1, budget; 2, the IT department; 3, infrastructure; or 4, security. And I'll leave that poll running for a couple of minutes just to get the majority of people answering, and then I'll respond to those results. The reason we have these different options listed here are because they're the 4 main reasons that customers will come to us with as issues or blockers that they see for IoT projects. There are responses to obviously all of those, and that will depend on a lot of different things, and sometimes a combination of things. But I will see what the poll comes back with, and then focus on a couple of areas that seem to have the highest answers. So we've had about 60% of the people voted so far, so I'll leave it running for another 30 seconds or so. Just leave it for another 10 seconds and then we'll end the poll. Okay, so let's end the poll. I've got the majority of people voted now. So I can see that infrastructure and security are much higher than budget and IT department. So infrastructure, I'll just touch on that a little bit, and it also leads quite nicely into my next slide. So the infrastructure for IoT solutions can often be a little bit of a blocker for installing IoT solutions if you're just wanting to do a very small proof of concept, because in many cases the infrastructure needed to kind of test 5 or 10 sensors may well be the same amount of infrastructure needed to do kind of a 500 sensor installation. So that doesn't come as a surprise that infrastructure is one of the key areas there, and security is the other area that has kind of the most votes. So I can touch on that a little bit later on as well. And just to mention one thing now is that using the MobiusFlow software, it can encrypt any data packages being sent end to end from the sensor through to the connector up to the gateway, and the gateway out to any third-party application. So security is something that IAconnects and the EnOcean Alliance as a whole take very seriously, and there are a number of white papers released now to talk through the different security features and hopefully put people's minds at ease when it comes to security. So I'll go on to the next slide now, which is to introduce the IAconnects Aruba plus EnOcean IoT solutions. So as I mentioned slightly earlier on, the problem with everything that we've already shown throughout this webinar today is that all of this costs money, and the reason that a lot of IoT proof of concepts fail is often due to the cost of the infrastructure to enable the sensors. So to make IoT more accessible, it needs to be cheaper. And one way to do this is to use an Aruba solution. I know John alluded to this right at the start of the webinar, and I've mentioned it a couple of times as well. But using an Aruba solution, you can create a smart building and reduce the infrastructure costs. So by integrating EnOcean IoT sensors, which you kind of see represented here on the diagram, into the existing Aruba IT infrastructure using the EnOcean USB plugged into the access points, you can then leverage the IT security mechanisms to protect the IoT data and services. And this is something that, as the poll suggested before, is very key to most people. And if you already have an Aruba solution installed with the security provisions in place, knowing that that is already there and something that you can take advantage of when adding any sensors into the mix, then it puts customers' minds at ease. Once the data has got to the Aruba access point, it can then go into MobiusFlow software, and that allows the processing of data at the edge and data visualization. And then from there you have the option to send it into third-party platforms and applications. Usually for large projects, users will already have a preferred platform such as Azure or IBM, or they may even have office booking systems such as iOffice or Condeco, and being able to send all of that data across the initial infrastructure that's already in place is a huge benefit for users. So I now have a second poll based on everything that we've gone through so far and the answers that I've given to the previous poll. What areas of IoT do your business or your customers see as being the most valuable? So is it desk occupancy monitoring, meeting room occupancy, people counting, so for common areas or floors or a whole building, indoor air quality, or smart lighting? Obviously, it might be a number of these. So if you can vote twice, then please select multiple options. And I'll touch on each of these a little bit by talking through them in the reference cases that I've got in the next 3 slides. So I'll leave this poll running for a couple of minutes as I did previously. Obviously, there's a chance that some of the results here might be slightly skewed due to the current pandemic situation, where desk occupancy, for instance, may not be quite as important as people counting and making sure there's only a certain number of people in a specific area. So I can talk about that in the future slides as well. We've got about half of the people voting so far. So I'll leave it running for about another 30 seconds, see if we can get a few more responses. Okay, so another 10 seconds. Okay, I think we'll close the poll there. So we have, well, that's quite surprising results actually. So the highest ones were desk occupancy monitoring and smart lighting, both at 30% each. 15% of people counting, same for indoor air quality, and just 10% for meeting room occupancy. So pre-pandemic, we saw desk occupancy monitoring as kind of the biggest demand for IoT solutions. That was particularly relevant for larger cities where desk space was hard to come by. So users wanted to be able to see how often desks were being used and whether they could book desks again using third-party applications. And smart lighting is something that has been being done for the last 15 or 20 years now, using a number of different solutions, including EnOcean. And smart lighting can obviously lead to energy cost reduction as well. So if you've got PIR, for example, that triggers the lights to come on when occupancy is detected and then goes off 10 seconds after no occupancy is detected, you can very quickly start to reduce your lighting costs. So I will move on to the next slide now, and if anyone has any questions about any of those areas later on, please send them in. I'll try and answer as many as possible in the chat at the end of this, and then I can take any offline that we don't get to. So the first reference case I wanted to share with you is a project that IAconnects have done over the past 12 months with a Canadian college. So for this college, we installed 2 physical gateways on site and 1 virtual gateway in the cloud for data aggregation. They wanted people counters on site, which would connect to the physical gateways and then up to the cloud via their college IT power over Ethernet network. However, there was 2 other solutions that the college already had that was outside the scope of IAconnects, which were washroom RFID readers and waste bin sensors. And the reason the college decided to go with us was because we could take the data from the washroom RFID readers into the physical gateway and then through the virtual gateway into their third-party cloud dashboard, and then could be viewed by the college operator on PCs or devices. And the waste bin sensors are a slightly different route, but their data was going into a waste bin cloud, and from there, that data was then sent through to our virtual gateway, which meant that all of the data could be viewed in one simple dashboard in the cloud. So the operators were only having to go to one instance to look at all of their data. And that was all possible due to the MobiusFlow software. The second reference case is a desk occupancy solution in London offices. So this was it's an anonymized use case of a multi-phase project that we have in London. There are over 3,500 desks monitored across 28 floors. The initial sensors used weren't actually EnOcean, but because of the phased approach to the project, we decided to suggest putting in multiple protocol connectors on the client network with no gateway. So this would allow EnOcean sensors to be added in future phases with no further infrastructure needing to be added. And this was something that was a real benefit to the customers. They were able to install everything during the pandemic, which obviously meant there was a lot less disruption to users within the building. So the initial use case, as I said, was for desk occupancy. This data was sent up to a third-party application. In this case, happened to be iOffice, and that data was then used for desk and room booking and managing that against the occupancy rates. The additional phases are likely to be looking at indoor air quality and smart lighting. So two of the things mentioned in the previous poll, and they're also potentially looking at adding power over Ethernet devices for people counting. But the fact that we've added multi-protocol connectors already, it means that they only need to add EnOcean devices into the building, which can be pre-commissioned, and then they literally need to stick them where they need them to go. And then they're off, and everything will also run back up into the iOffice application. So by doing this phased approach and by adding the infrastructure in at the beginning, it allows us to mix technologies for the customer using the best of breed sensors or devices, and therefore creating the best possible solution for them. And then the final reference case is a combination of 3 different use cases that we have with multiple universities in the UK and Ireland. So the solutions include total building occupancy monitoring, washroom occupancy, meeting rooms, so the lighting and occupancy control for there, the CO2 temperature and humidity monitoring, and the kind of the key reason that CO2 levels have become more and more prevalent is because there's studies shown to show a correlation of higher levels of CO2 that can increase the COVID-19 transmission rates. And I've shared a link to a white paper on this slide here. So when these slides are shared after the event, you'll be able to view that white paper there to see what that correlation looks like. Pre-pandemic, however, CO2 levels were important for another reason. It was looking at productivity levels versus CO2 levels. So another study, which again I've linked to the bottom of the slide, shows that in this particular study, it found that workers were able to work up to 60% faster in lower CO2 concentrations. So if you think about when you're in a meeting room that maybe seats 8 people and you're in there for an hour, you can probably concentrate and get things done relatively well. If you're in there for much longer than an hour, you'll start to feel a little bit sleepier, like you might want to get up and have a stretch or go and grab a coffee. If you're in there for half a day without opening the doors or the windows, you'll start to feel it get a bit stuffier. And most people think this is just because you're getting tired, that you're losing concentration. But the fact is, if you're in an enclosed space, that the CO2 levels will steadily increase, and the longer you're in there, the higher the levels of CO2, and therefore the lower productivity there will be in that particular room. Just to mention, there are other indoor air quality monitoring options out there as well, looking at kind of volatile organic compounds and particulate levels. I won't go into too much detail about that now because I know we're about up for time. So all these reference cases will be included in the slides that will be sent out, or also on the link that EnOcean will provide as a webinar link. So now I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions. I see there's a few already being sent in, so I know I'm very short for time. I'll just try and answer a couple of them. So one was, we usually purchase IT solutions through resellers. Do you have agreements with resellers in Europe? So short answer is yes, we do. We have agreements with multiple resellers. Depending on the type of solution, it may be that we suggest using one over another. But if you have any specific questions around solutions or specific resellers, please do get in touch. Another question, desk occupancy monitoring has been a popular solution with our customers. Do you see this demand changing with the majority of people working from home throughout the pandemic? So yes, well, yes and no. We have seen quite a big demand still for desk occupancy monitoring, but we've also been involved in lots of kind of planning sessions with customers who are looking to rejig their offices and potentially create more meeting areas, allowing people to come into the office for more pressing matters such as customer meetings, and then working from home at other times. So removing some of the desks and adding additional meeting room facilities. We are about out of time now, so all the other questions I'll respond to offline. If I don't get back to you within the next couple of days, please do nudge me via email, and I'll just pass over back to John Corbett from EnOcean now just to end the session.
Okay, well, thank you ever so much for attending it. I hope that has been a benefit to you. We'll get back to you with some of the questions you've got, and if you've got any other questions regarding ourselves, our emails are on the actual webinar material. So please get in touch with us or the info lines at either of our companies. Just to say, we also have another webinar coming. Today's seminar has been about EnOcean, which is the sub-gigahertz products that we make, but we also do Bluetooth, and our partner from Kasambi will be presenting that on the 17th. So if you're interested in lighting type solutions, which are using Bluetooth mesh, our next webinar will be involved in that, and you're very welcome to attend. Again, I'd like to thank you all, and here's our two email addresses if you wish them. I wish you a good day, and I hope you keep safe, and I will now close the seminar. Thank you very much.